In this episode of the podcast, Mike and I talk about college baseball, the Major League Baseball draft, and hard work versus talent.
I think what we should start with is, you were putting out some info on Twitter about how basically like all projection systems handle player development as basically a constant, which I think is probably the right approach, since trying to model player development is hard and we've tried to do it ourselves, but like modeling it at the organization level. So it's a very convenient assumption, but it is definitely wrong. And so what were you thinking about it?
Yeah. I mean, the recap is that all the public projection systems, most of which are great, still just hold the organization. If a player is drafted and appears in the big leagues or not, or whatever, with one organization, their projection does not change if they're with any other organization. I think anyone...
So just to be clear, it's like if I'm any rounder, if I'm a draft pick, I come up through the Dodgers organization and I appear in the big leagues, my steamer projection is the same if I stay with the Dodgers for the whole year versus if I get traded to another less good team at developing players.
That's right.
Or potentially with like coaching too.
Yeah. It holds coach is constant.
Yeah.
So that's obviously incorrect. Everyone knows it's incorrect. And it is difficult to model, but doesn't need to be like, we don't need strong precision to get value. If you're a fantasy baseball junkie or someone just interested in these things, you shouldn't just hold it constant. Well, we all know the 5 best organizations. We all know the 5 worst. We can not get into details, but okay, so there's a huge gray area where we don't necessarily know how good they are. Turnover, that's fine. Just hold those all constant and just, bump it up, because we already do this. We talk about, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome if Isaac Paredes started pulling the ball and was good? Oh, look at this. He plays for Tampa and he's very good. Isn't that? He pulls the ball more than Nolan Arenado.
Sure.
Like, extreme example. Who, like Arenado's expected home runs are always much lower than his real because he capitalizes on pulling the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And Paredes is the same way. So we already know it. We already talk about it. Oh, another Tampa Bay pitcher is good,
Air puller.
Yeah, I can't believe it. This pitcher for Tampa Bay is good. Unbelievable. This pitcher, can't believe Garrett Cole was good when he went to the Astros. It's like, well, that's just how we all know it. So
Sure. Yeah. For years, people were begging to get Garrett out of Pittsburgh.
And it's just no different than maybe a future topic we'll talk about than sports betting. It's very hard to model home field advantage in many sports, at least last time I checked. It's been a long time. So what a lot of the sharp bettors did, instead of modeling a percentage or whatever, they would just add a couple cents to the line. They would just put their thumb on the scale and be like, it's like worth like 5 cents to be the home team. And that would imply, even at a 70% win expectancy, it doesn't add, 5 cents is much less at 70% win expectancy, but they still just like, that was it,
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty accurate. So just some small offset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't something like this also only appear at the extreme outliers? Like if you model everything out and you're like, all right, this guy's a pitcher and he's being traded from the 13th best pitching development organization to the 11th. Seems like that is a push.
Yeah, it's really from the bottom quartile to the top or vice versa that you really need to be worried about. Yeah.
And why would it be true in the reverse? I mean, we all I think can grasp like, okay, a guy, has potential, but it's not being utilized by these folks in the bottom quartile, which is, the bottom 25%. But like, okay, so there's, the 6 worst teams or whatever. It's not being utilized by him, but he gets traded to the 4th best team and the coaches are coaching him up and like, here's all this unlocked talent. How does it work? How does it work in reverse?
There's just some of the teams in the bottom quartile, really the bottom of the barrel. There's there's environmental pressure. You are the average of the 5 people whatever that airport book, thing.
That's not a book. That sounds like half a sentence.
Exactly.
Many airport books should be our opposite.
Yes, exactly. It should be 0 cents. But yeah,
work efficiently. There you go.
The average of the 5 people around you, and that's definitely true. If you get traded and you have a farm system and a big leagues and coaches and front offices that are indoctrinated with a suboptimal way and they don't care, or they believe that their method is good, then no matter how much you fight it every single day, you'll capitulate on some degree and you won't develop into who you should be. And that's even the most resilient. And there are many examples of this that I had when I was with the Reds and were traded to less than desirable organizations. And you start to, those players have told me, to my face, yeah, I just started throwing this sinker or I started throwing this pitch and I don't know why. My stuff plus is so bad and I don't know how I got to this point. It does happen. And these are college players in A to AA to AAA. Like they're older. It's not a 19-year-old high school impressionable kid, which is a little more understandable, but if you're 24 and 25, 26 and it still happens, and then ultimately the other part is sometimes the coaches in the big leagues for these organizations are so dogmatic that if you end up trying to do something like throw like 60% slider, you're just going to get yelled at by the coach and maybe you'll get sent down, because people forget that it's widely assumed that the general manager, president of baseball operations, the czar of baseball ops or whatever they call them these days, calls all the shots. And that's just not true. Like there's this whole proletariat, middle class, middle management layer that has a lot of control. And in some of the archaic organizations, the manager still has dictatorial control over the roster.
Sure.
Which, of course, isn't the case in 25 at least organizations, probably more than that. But in some of the organizations, the manager still does call the shots, exclusively. And so if you run across the manager, you may just get sent down, So that is another rare, but definitely is possible.
Yeah. And also, if you conceive of your playing career as just this like series of levels, then the edges become so thin in the upper atmosphere of the game. It's like if you are, the difference between the best player in the world and the 100th best is large. The difference between the 100th best and the 1,000th best or 10,000th best is large, but also comparatively small. Like it's a mile per hour of bat speed. It's half a grade of swing decisions or contact quality. It's these small edges that have these like large cumulative effects.
2 players come to mind with the Red Sox, wearing this pullover. But Jarren Duran is a top 10 player by wins above replacement currently. Above Juan Soto currently by Baseball Ref WAR. And
no way.
4.4 over 4.2.
That's outrageous.
It's one of those ridiculous comparison graphics you always see. But a big thing is his bat speed grade jumped a grade and a half a couple years ago. And he got noticeably, bigger. Weight training, I think, took more seriously or, got a lot bigger. Whether he did any targeted bat speed training or not, I don't know. But like this bat speed grade improvement over the last couple of years has really transformed him into being a quite a good player into truly one of the game's best players right now, which is awesome. And David Hamilton is probably the other example who had like close to 20 grade bat speed in the minor leagues, but 80 speed, like just run speed. Incredible defender, won minor league defender of the year at least once. And has been doing targeted bat speed training, which we know specifically because some former Driveline employees are over there talk about it and do it. And his bat speed grades have not yet reached big league average, but they're getting close. And so it's not about being Stanton's bat speed or 70s, grade. Sometimes going from 20 to 35 or, these are just illustrative numbers. I don't know off the top of my head. But just going from bottom of the barrel to below average is still huge because if you're really good at baseball in the other parts of the game, that could be good. And now David is also one of the game's better players.
That's right.
And that's a huge difference. He's probably always a big leaguer. I'm sure he would say that. I don't know exactly. I don't know his projections on the top of my head, but not only is he a big leaguer, he's quite the impactful big leaguer now at a skill position. And so is Duran, of course.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like you would think that, to your point about these like collegiate players that come into an organization and they have a process and they know how they want to attack hitters and they like have something of a plan, right? To be impressionable to a coach where maybe that coach is suggesting 3 or 4 or 5 wholesale changes that they're rejecting, but then they're just agreeing to one or half of one, or even like a usage thing. Like, oh, why don't you just like flip this in as a get me over or whatever, or why don't you like change your 2-strike approach or whatever. It's just like that margin like can turn you from like playable to unplayable. And then just depending on where you're at in like the slope of your career, it just really matters like who you surround yourself with. Because it's like, oh, I spent 2 years wandering the desert in high A while I was trying to undo everything my well-meaning coach told me to do about, shifting my splitter grip. And then all of a sudden it's just like, yeah, that's it, dude. You're cooked.
Right. Yeah, and then somehow my fastball got
Yeah.
unrelated.
Yeah.
The thing is, you may not know what happened.
Yeah, and that's it. You just cooked.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's like, oh, I got back to where I was, and it's like, yeah, well, now you're 2 years older,
And the game's gotten tougher.
Yeah, and no one cares. That's also true. I've been like thinking about the world in this way, especially as we start to get into some stuff with smart reports and like the way that our training is shifting is around sort of like execution grades for your program, and like the game does break down into sort of like what is the level that you're at, what is the level you're trying to get to, and then what opportunities do you have. Like you can't make these level jumps without opportunity, but you don't get the opportunities without being at least above average for your current level with some projectability to being at least average at the future level, however thin that is.
Yeah, you got that playing time.
Yeah, you just gotta be able to do it at some level, and so it's just interesting because I've been thinking a lot about how wasting a year is just could in some cases can be the end.
I had a hour and a half long conversation with future high draft pick Travis Bazzana about that actually in the weight room just now, literally. He's a psychopath. I didn't know that about him. He was showing me logs from 2018 on his iPhone, his workout logs.
Oh yeah.
Just like hitting and talk about the role of luck to some, Glenn Williams, friend of the program, giving him weighted bats to swing forever ago.
Did he really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. He was like, oh, can I use those? And Willow's like, you can have them. No one else uses them. Which not surprising. Willow's quite the supportive person. To workouts, and he said his dad would never push him, but he's like, I'll come home early to hit with you, whatever, and he just had to kind of block out a lot of advice from well-meaning but limiting people. You're small. What are you going to be, the first pick of the draft? You're going to go to D1 when he's 14. All this other stuff. Like, you have to have more realistic goals, and he never had. He had the audacity to just like kind of challenge it. And just seeing his year-over-year progression, his 90th percentile EV has gone up and up and up over year. His air pull percentage is up. All these things that we know correlate. And I just asked him, like why he did a lot of this. And he's like, I just had to, he's geared differently for sure. Obviously had a supportive family. But just was doing research on the internet when he was 14, finding our stuff, finding other people. And, did what he felt worked, and then when he came here, he said that 10-week period he was here between freshman and sophomore year was huge, because it was like, oh, these are the things big leaguers do. I need to do these things. How do I get there? I need to flatten my attack angle, and he got more targeted training, so he got quite a bit better. He points to that as being one of the bigger things, and then the supportive part is what I wanted to talk about, because he had the intelligence and the family support and the country support, I'm assuming, to pick the right agent he was with.
Sure.
Right agencies. And there's a lot of great agencies. This isn't about endorsing any one of them, but Excel Sports Management is who he's with. And it's, they're, good. We have good relations with them at Driveline. And we have for a long time when Driveline was not as big as it is. And there's those agencies that always, gave us the time of day when we were nobodies. And I know that you don't forget about them, and I definitely don't either. And so, when those agents are like, they're telling him the same thing that we're telling them, and not to be like, on our good side or whatever, but there's no reason to put limits on you. Should I play in the Cape? Like advice that is very good for their career, and is not self-limiting. And then of course Mitch Canham and the guys at Oregon State definitely don't put any sort of limits on these guys. So it's it's the right environment. I think Travis knew that at a young age that he should have been around that, which was pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, the advice is one thing, and the environment to implement it and then like push yourself is the other thing. It's honestly why I think, you know, remote training is so challenging. Like when you do, you know, switch into this like remote environment, it's just like who's with you, you know, like it's just sometimes it's literally you alone, or sometimes it's you know, trying to navigate it along with all these other commitments that you've got to do.
Data though, right? And smart reports. Like now there's someone in the room with you because you don't know if you're getting better, but if you have a blast sensor and these things, at least you know what you're competing against, you know, your targets.
Yeah, and honestly, it allows you to be like pretty sharp and focused. Because on the one hand, you know, there's the failure of execution, which is just like I had a hybrid B scheduled for today, but I just didn't do it. You know, like that's one mode of failure. But it's not a common mode of failure for most athletes beyond high school. Like we see a lot of high school athletes that, or like, you know, younger academy kids that are just like, I skipped it today. Like, oh, all right, I guess you did. You know, but then, you know, on the other hand of things, like, you know, the guys that are doing the work, but they aren't actually doing the work, but they don't know that they're not doing the work. So they're like on a recovery day and they're blowing it out, or they're on a high intensity day and they just can't get it dialed up. And it's like, if you can't get it dialed up on a high intensity day, and part of that reason is because you're like throwing your, you know, mound plyos into a tree or whatever behind the stadium, like because nobody's supporting you. It's like you don't have that additional adrenaline push to like spike your throwing intensities to where you need to be to get a training effect. Then, you know, that becomes a challenge.
Yeah, you got to seek out other people, you know, whether it's online people or, well, that's the value of social media. You know, it has a lot of vices, but you can use social media to stay connected and push each other, you know, which I think is good. And it's funny, my chess coach, shout out, you know, Mark Esserman, who definitely is not going to watch this, but he talked a lot about someone was like hard work versus talent or whatever. He's like, could you talk about it? And he said, sure. And he told the story. It's famous in the chess community about like, you know, young prodigy coach comes over. He's like, you know, he doesn't, Regina, you know, this guy doesn't have it. Your son doesn't have the ability. And it's told from the perspective of the kid, who is Garry Kasparov. So he's one of the best chess players ever. I'm considered the best ever. So it's like, if they're that bad at identifying that, and what Kasparov always said, he's like, obviously I'm talented. He's like, but in the Soviet Union, being pretty talented is not enough. Like you have to be the most talented for them to care about you. And he's like, but hard work is a talent. Like the ability to like actually do this over and over and to be, you know, single-minded is in itself a talent. He's like, and that's what the Soviets were not very good at identifying. He's like, and that's what Americans actually are really good at identifying, is that it's just the two different political systems at the time. You have to believe in that. And so Garry is very pro-American, as people know, but he talks, he's like, you know, of all the problems that America has, he's like, one of the shining things is like that they do believe that hard work is a talent here, you know, whereas in the Soviet Union, that literally is anathema to the concept of, you know? And he said, so, you know, it's not possible to know, you know, how hard, and what Mark said specifically, he's like, I can train for an hour on chess and this guy can train for an hour on chess and we're going to get totally different things out of it. You know, maybe I'm worse because I'm already so good at chess and I don't take it that seriously. And maybe he is much worse at chess, but his hour is much more impactful. You know, and he's like, and that's something you have to fight the better you get at chess. It feels like training is worthless. He's like, because it's so much harder to get better. He's like, but you have to fight that all the time. You know, you have to make it challenging. You have to make it harder. You know, so I thought that was actually pretty interesting stuff to try to stay engaged. And so even he, when he was pushing for Grandmaster, you know, was having difficulty staying motivated. You know, now he plays semi-pro tennis and he hits all the time. And, you know, the parallels are funny. When I met up with him in Boston, I was like, how often do you hit when you're about to go play? And he's like, I probably hit on the wall like 5 days a week. I try to play like 4 matches a week and I lift and then I do this. He's exactly my age. You know, we're talking. I said, no, would you consider that like pretty good training? Like, you know, if you were to go play Bob Bryan, you know, America's best tennis player ever, you know, would like, and they're friends. He's like, if you go play them, he's like, or like someone in your rating range, like how he's like, I would get killed. He's like, that's like the bare minimum when you're 40. It's like you have to hit for 15 hours a week and play 4 games and like, and then maybe I would love to be as good as I was a month ago. He's like, but that's about it, you know, and that's, but that's perspective you only gain as you get older anyway. You know, there's only so many Travis Bazzanas who like, he was skilled and talented, but his mentality at age 14 is ridiculous. I've only heard that in a few other athletes, and it's a credit to his family, and it's a credit to his country and himself, of course, like to be surrounded by that type of attitude. But what Travis told me and what Mark tells me and everyone that's great is like the more you do it, the easier it gets to, not the work gets easier, but just the idea of going to work every single day.
Showing up gets easier.
Yeah, it's no different than you and me, right? Coming to work, like people, the crazy work hours and days and that stuff we're putting into, but we make time for our families and how much work we put in here. And there was, how do you work these hour days? It's like, we didn't start by working 16-hour days. When I was 14, I had terrible work ethic, but like, of the many good things pro gambling gives you is it's very fair. It's very fair. Every hour you're not playing poker, you're not earning, and this having been one as well. So every hour you're not, and that's what pro gambling gives you is like, oh, you're going to go to bed? That's 8 hours you could have been working. Dude, the games always exist, man. I mean, that's not a healthy attitude, but it's important to know what's on the other side, because you could just work every hour of the day. Like there isn't a reason you could stop, and then you learn how to balance your life.
Yeah.
But when you are really good at poker, like you and I were, like you have to understand every hour I'm not maximizing this or studying to be good at it is your hourly rate's $40, $60, $80, whatever. It's like
the worst thing that happened to me during that period of time was I was not seriously, I started and then was like sort of dinking around, and I was like, oh, I'm like making kind of a decent amount of money.
That's right.
I wonder how much I'm making per hour.
Oh no.
And then that was the worst. That was the worst thing, because I would be sitting.
It's the best thing to know and the worst thing.
I know. I was like sitting in class. I was sitting talking to people, and I was like, oh man, I could be making $200 right now.
Yeah.
Like
this really have to be at this
30-minute conversation just cost me $140.
Because then I got to walk home. I got to load up the tracker. I got to get.
It's not even that. You just start. It puts you in it put me in a pretty dark space, because I was all right. Like this is a 20-minute conversation that I'm having with a friend, and I'm just like, is this person really worth like, it's just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it takes you to some bad places, but it's.
But you do
come out on a better. Most come out on a good, and because like, how many pro gamblers? Gamblers, like back then, that have a bad work ethic these days? Like no chance. They have other vices or whatever, but like some huge percentage of NBA assistant general managers and GMs and in the NHL now are ex-pro gambler. It's nuts, because like their ability to work is unparalleled.
You said something interesting.
And it's funny when you take away the money. It's like, oh, you don't make $250 an hour anymore.
That's right.
But for some stupid reason, we still work that.
No.
Like you think you would, like the work would go down, but it doesn't. And these people, like, it's like, well, all I know is how to work. So
you find the game within the game.
Yeah, you would think that the direct incentive being taken away would stop you, and it doesn't for some reason.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that the thing that you said that I thought was interesting that I wanted to get back to is like, you made an offhand comment that like, if you wander 2 years in the desert on a lot of this stuff, then all of a sudden, like, you lose 2 years.
Yep.
But your comment was like, yeah, but then the game gets better too. And that, I think, is the thing that people really don't conceive about the sort of dynamics being played out at the upper echelons of baseball, is like, stepping off the ride for a year or two is not just like just for your skills to flatline or degrade and then come back or whatever. Is like, you don't return to, you might return to function, but then relative to the rest of the league, you are, to some degree degraded, just because the floor of the league keeps going up on like a pretty irregular basis. And it's this relentless push towards just the players being better and better and better.
I think it's worse if you're a pitcher right now. For a long time, it was the hitter.
I think so too.
Yeah, for a long time, the hitter. It was way worse if you took a year off of hitting.
Mm-hmm.
But pitching, because the hitters it's a joke how good they are.
The hitters are really good.
The pitch mix in a year has changed from being four-seam dominant to sinkers are dominating now. And do you think like this is just because like pitchers liked it? It's like, no, the hitters like solved a problem. Well, now this is a pitcher's problem. Now
ecologically, the whole...
So fast.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep changing. It's why I'm always very bearish and cautious about these big changes to the run environment and to changing, anything that favors the pitchers, because while it certainly is out of whack, we haven't yet seen the hitters adopting advanced technology, and the technology has not met them entirely. We're still getting there. There's a lot more, the pitcher initiates the action, therefore it's easier to model.
Yep.
But we're getting there faster, and it's not just us, it's many companies making improvements. But it's becoming so clear how important bat speed is, and now it's in the public, and basically exactly what Andrew Wright and Tanner Stokke said was going to happen is starting to happen. Is that general cognition of what it means in your career is starting to take root. And it will take a couple of years before it's fully propagated, but maybe not a few years actually. It'll probably be faster. But we're starting to see it.
Yeah, I think it will move faster because there are these like existing mental models of like, oh, that worked in pitching. This is coming to hitting. It worked in this way, so we should try there first. And then for quite a long time on the pitching side of things, like it's not like people weren't trying to get better.
Right.
It's just that there was a lot of stuff that people tried that didn't really work as well, and we didn't have a good sense for like how all this stuff interplayed. But it's, ever so slowly marching towards becoming a decently solved problem.
And we'll also we'll speed run many of the steps of grief acceptance, unlike in pitching, where it's like, oh, it works. We've talked about this a million times. Right, but it works for throwing. It doesn't work for pitching.
Yeah.
So in hitting, we're going to compress that extremely fast because, coach is going to be like, I already seen this.
Maybe.
It'll speed run. It's not going to take it away.
Oh, yeah, it definitely won't take it away. It definitely won't take it away.
So you're probably right.
It's just like, yeah, Luis Arias does not prove the theory. He's the outlier that proves that, like, bat speed as the dominant archetype just like matters.
Yeah, but he's doing pretty good. He's doing a good job of holding down the progress, though. No offense to Luis.
I think he's he's great. He's great. Obviously, he's like the Jamie Moyer of the era, where they're like, see, this guy can do it, and it's like, yeah, shouldn't you just celebrate him for like what he is, which is like an elite outlier on like some extreme variable that matters?
Yeah.
Like we don't look at Billy Hamilton and then be like, we should go to Eugene and get 20 of the fastest athletes,
Been tried.
It's just like, yeah, but like, so anyways, my point is that like, it's just such an outlier on, he's great. It's fun to watch him hit. Do you think we were talking about environmental factors and how like having previous mental models of success plus having like a community that's done it before and like all these things, do you think that is finally some of what is leading to this like wave of Japanese stars like breaking out? Or do you think it's just the players are better? Or do you think it's some others?
It's going to be interesting what this Rintaro Sasaki, right? The guy that came over.
Yeah.
In City College. That's going to change the environment. Like if that's a thing that good amateur Japanese players, Korean, whatever, do. We already see that in Australia, right? Obviously Bazzana and Charles coming here, that's, normal. But if that happens in Japan, that could be pretty interesting, how it might change the environment. That could be another signal to change over there. So yeah, I think it is changing. You're seeing it, not just Japan, you're seeing it in Latin America, Korea, and other places that are modernizing, so to speak.
Do you think part of that is just like the rise of like Ohtani does it, and then he becomes like a mental model for like, oh wow, this guy went over, did it. He's a star. I can go do it too because we have like cultural familiarity.
Yeah, and no disrespect to Ohtani, but I think that probably kickstarted the conversation. But there's always the cop out. There's always the cop out that Ohtani was elite when he was young. When he was on the
fighters.
No, like even in high school, like big.
Oh yeah,
it's him and Fujinami. Like they were already elite. It does kickstart some conversation, but it's like, oh, but he was a great player.
Sure.
So big deal that he won the MVP. Like, yeah, that's exciting, but he would have won that over in Japan. He was already that good before he did any of this stuff. And I think what really changed people's minds was Senga. Like that's I think in Japan specifically, because he was an undrafted player to get to the big leagues. One of 2 undrafted players ever to be an all-star. There's only 2 ever to do it in Japan. And I think that's what caused people to be like, well, that doesn't happen here. Undrafted players being good in America and in all the 4 sports is, do you agree? We love it. Tony Romo.
Sure.
Like Carson Spires, right? Like, Mike Piazza, effectively undrafted, 51st.
62nd.
So it was, right? So like, that's a ridiculous. Like, he doesn't even get drafted in 2 consecutive years in today's draft. 3, actually.
3.
Right? So it's like, that's effectively undrafted. So that's a great story. Not to take anything away from those players. But in America, we embrace that. In Japan, it's Kai Pisan is one of them, catcher. Yamamoto Cannon, I believe. And then, as they call him, and Senga. That's it. Right? So that, I thought, was like, oh, my God. Not only is Senga a good big leaguer, he, damn well was top 5 in the Cy Young voting or something like that. He was really good.
He's good.
He's one of the best players in America. And I think that is what opened up. And I heard that from a couple agents, and I heard it from, an agent that reps a lot of Japanese players. He told me that, that's Ohtani's like, oh yeah, that's interesting, but whatever. And then Senga was like, oh, that's different. We don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that caused people, and that not just people, that caused younger kids and others. And Senga pretty well, and I do too. And Senga was very outspoken. He went back to Japan and was like, all right, listen up, because he's not Ohtani. And it's not the same, right? Like when you're that big of a media icon, Ohtani, that's part of it. Whereas Senga, went back and he's like, all right, here's how I feel about it. And here's what Japan's doing wrong. Here's what they do well. And here's how you can, and I think, Senga's very, very vocal about it, and I think
now you have you got Suzuki, you got Imanaga, you've got all these guys that have come over, and it's like, yes. And Yamamoto, the interesting thing is Yamamoto is almost getting a Zach Wheeler type contract, because it's like, hey, we identified in this pitch profile the characteristics of a likely frontline starter, in the way that the Phillies hunted out Wheeler. And
yes, that changed. That's the seminal change.
Yeah, and it's like okay, now we can do that, but with Japanese players all of a sudden, that just that works. That becomes that starts to become interesting, especially if there's some buy-in from the players as well, that oh yeah,
much tougher for Yamamoto too, because it's not it's Wheeler but Japanese. It's no, his stuff is good, his command is otherworldly.
Yeah,
so sure. I guess we can now model that. It's but you never really know until you bring him over. You know, it's and that's also the first there's no 29-year-old Cubans or Americans recently that had elite command that you tested on. It's I guess we'll try, and then it's oh, it does matter. It is that valuable. That outlier tool did play over here. And I think it's less obvious that elite command in Japan is going to play in America, at least to me, elite command. And
why not? Just because there's a nibble effect? Where
it just feels like it's
hitters are weaker.
Yeah, the hitter population is different. His stuff is it isn't pedestrian, but it's not otherworldly. So it's he can't, maybe it's just a subjective opinion of mine. It's oh, this guy came over and he overpowered all hitters and struck everyone out, many such cases. Yeah, but it's oh, this guy is one of the best command pitchers, and that actually worked in the big leagues with a different zone, a different culture, different types of hitters.
Different ball.
Yeah, that's a huge. And so I think it's kudos to the Dodgers, obviously, for pulling the trigger on it and going for it. And the Cubs, too, for Imanaga, and I think that those things are going to pressure America, but then also Japan, too. The youth movement over there, but then it's going to pressure free agency over here. In possibly a very good way for the players, because now maybe there's a larger pool of players that might be able to make much more money, which could be good.
Dude, I think in 10 years there is definitely a world where 30% of the league is Japanese. And
yeah, it's just not going to stop with why Koreans. We should be getting Hassan Kim and et cetera. There's got to be others that they can't be the only ones that they were good choices.
Yeah, I think it's less.
Of course, a lot of them go to MPB, but still,
I think it's less that than there are some population effects of having baseball be the dominant sport in the country.
Yep, that's true.
Somebody once said, somebody once explained the rise of the Dominican as they were well, yeah, what if you just had Los Angeles, but nobody was allowed to play football or basketball?
Right.
All the high school kids just only played baseball. It's oh yeah, okay. Well, then you could start to see that that would be a pretty dominant city in baseball if just in one place, and it was 9-10 million people or whatever, they all just played played baseball, and like shook that out, as opposed to getting the talent pool getting split up. And so then that's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for these places where like baseball's the number one or the number two sport, and there's like a lot of cultural stickiness around like, let's get these guys tracked through starting at a young age. And I think that is probably Japan, and that I think is like, oh shoot. And they've got this culture of the players being so skilled and so like technically adept.
I think it also, the other side of it is you have to go wide as well. And I think the NBA has done a good job of that, whether it's in China to Europe to Australia. Like I'm sure a lot of those initiatives of spreading basketball by the NBA decades and decades ago, I don't know the history of it. I'm sure they were looked at as stupid or like, oh, what do we care about this? And then now we turn on the TV and the best players are European.
Sure.
And whether they're the better or worse than Americans, that's not the point. It's like, but all that matters is that elite players from Europe now play in the NBA. And that's a great story. Australia too. It's like, these are good things. And I'm sure those initiatives, however long ago they were seen as kind of dumb. And so that's why I'm bullish on, whether, however high Bazzana goes, he's going to be the highest drafted Australian.
Sure.
And like that could have a big thing. And so those initiatives that we were personally involved in, and we were the beneficiary of initiatives that were probably much more unpopular 10 years prior to us going to Australia.
Yep.
Those are, and I asked Bazzana to his face today, actually. I was like, were you there when Mike and I and Taiki were there? And he said, no. He's like, I was too young and I wasn't good enough. He's like, but I knew about it. And then Stokey said, do you remember when we went to Camelback Ranch? Do you remember this? And were you there for that? Camelback Ranch, we watched them play the Royals or whatever.
No, I wasn't there, because then we assessed them all at Arizona.
Yeah, Bazzana was there at that. He's part of that. And he has video of it, and it's awful. He's terrible. But he's just like, I always dreamed of doing this and knew it. And it's just like, man, like, what in an alternate universe, Bazzana is just the best Australian, rules football. Or rugby, he's
sure.
37s or something like that. And
sure.
That, he loved baseball, and those initiatives, he remembered those. So that's a kudos to the league office, MLB, to see that, and MIC, SEED. Like they deserve a lot of the credit for Bazzana going as high as, obviously Travis deserves all the credit, primary, but it's like MLB, he cites that as like, those are the things he aspired to, he got inspired by. And so, did the league office even know that or remember? It's like, I'm sure I'll remind them, but that's pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't predict where the best players are going to come from. So I certainly agree with you, the depth of it, or like, the primary thing, but it's like, man, that's why it's bullish to be like, what if we open up academies in, Europe, Brazil, Australia, like these big population, places that, oh, these are stupid ideas. Okay, but 20 years from now, you don't know.
India and Pakistan.
India, I think about a lot, obviously.
India and Pakistan.
It's like, it's they already play cricket a ton. They already throw stuff.
They rotate. There's a lot of folks over there.
I'd say, and basically, it's not like we're like lobbying MLB. Like they've been beating this drum for a long time.
Yeah.
But you have all these other coaches that
they can do math,
stupid and whatever.
They can do some math.
Yeah, but it's isn't this dumb. Yeah, but there's a lot of coaches that are this dumb or whatever. But it's like, no, but this has to be measured on decades timelines. Like that's where it is
for sure.
The next greatest Indian baseball player. I hope Nimala does really well, but he may not be born yet. And in fact, it's very likely that he's not. And so we just have to keep that in mind, that we're going to keep pushing.
Yeah, but that's honestly the thing that gives me, like, I was saying in like 10 years time, it's possible that like the Japanese players see like such, because the thing that
a strong minority.
Yeah, the thing that seems different to me is like, I came of age in a world of like Keiagawa and some of these other guys that came over.
That's the first guy you think of?
Yeah, somewhat.
Not Daisuke?
No. I'm saying like there were obvious. The track record was way more mixed.
I see. Oh yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, we have these guys. You've got Hideki Matsui, crushes it. Daisuke, great. And it's like you have a couple duds, and it's like But now it's like almost every single guy is like Suzuki contributing, Imanaga contributing, like Yamamoto contribute. It's just like, okay, so like what's next? You're gonna start to like tick down the talent levels, and there's like plenty more guys over there that are like,
Kikuchi's good,
ready to come over.
Kuma was really good.
Yeah, but it's just like, okay, so like where does it stop? Like where does it level set out?
And they were older, Senga, older, free agent
for sure.
Iwakuma, free agent also, so older.
Yeah.
Kikuchi, I don't think that old, but still like not super young, so it's like, what if we can start peeling younger, then yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is like, okay, like who knows if the Sasaki thing at Stanford is like gonna click, like very long term. But I think it's a great move by him. I think it's really smart. If it does work, I mean, my goodness,
Could change amateur.
it could change. Yeah,
And pro, of course, downstream. But then what if the best amateur players are Japanese in our colleges?
that's what I'm saying.
That could be nuts.
Yeah,
That could be nuts.
they're like,
Hey, what if Otani played college
they're just like,
baseball? If Otani played for like Vanderbilt, that would be so funny.
that's right.
It'd be better if it was like a non-traditional school. Like,
Where would he have gone? UCLA?
yeah, what if he just played for like Tennessee? For Tony Vitello.
No.
What do you mean no?
He had the whole questionnaire thing that was like,
Okay, but the next one.
where does your town give like how does your town give cultural support?
You've seen Tony give
Yeah,
interviews. He might be able to get it done. He might build a place for him. Like
That's right.
he's a great recruiter.
The fish gets flown in daily.
Yeah, he could do it. He would fly it in. Like you've seen his. These college recruiters. They don't stop at anything to get the players better.
For sure.
So Otani's
They can't
He just
anymore. Sure. But they can't anymore.
No,
like
for sure.
It's just like, I thought Jay Johnson at LSU gave a really insightful comment about.
I didn't hear it. I'm sure it's good.
Oh, he was just like, it was right after LSU got bounced this year, and he was just like, I take responsibility. I'm obviously paraphrasing and probably poorly, but the gist of it was like, I take responsibility for how the team is built and configured, and like we used to be in an era of program building, and that was like sort of how I've conceived of my role, and I need to grapple with the fact that the world has changed, and we're now just assembling a new team year after year after year. And I thought it was reflective, but also like, well, that guy's one of the best coaches in college, and for him to be like publicly ruminating on like, wow, I really got to change my whole thing after being so wildly successful for quite a long time at like running his playbook is like, oh man, like there's many bat signals that are going up this year specifically, being like college baseball is way different.
Yep, it's gonna be a have and have less.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Tony Vitello, but like he was basically, this is like, he's talking about the power two of like just the ACC and the SEC. The College World Series was only SEC and ACC teams.
It's nuts. As of 2009, only two SEC schools ever won the College World Series. You know that? As of 2009.
Oh, like by the time 2009 came around,
yep,
only two had won it.
Only two of them.
Yeah, because it was West Coast. It was West Coast sport
And ACC dominated, and the West Coast and ACC dominated, and then now it's like the SEC has won a zillion. It's nuts,
Yeah,
and they're overrepresented in the College World Series and the playoffs. And
yeah. Well, everyone was all steamed up about Florida making it with a 13-17 record in the conference, and they make a huge run. And it's like,
yeah, LSU, they had a bad losing record, and then they performed great in the regional. They didn't make it out, but it's like, man, they, supers and whatever. Like it's like, oh, even in a down year, LSU is plenty. I mean, things everything break their way. They play in the World Series.
Crazy dangerous.
Yeah. And Tennessee, right? They lost Chase Burns. Still won.
I know that is not.
Yeah, and Dollander. I mean, obviously he aged out, but I mean, still, they had that team that was the wire to wire number one.
Yeah.
The Dollander. There is a randomness, and then they lose Chase Burns, and then whatever, and then just and that's a tough. Yeah, A&M was great too, of course. It is just like it was nuts to watch the level of play in college baseball is just a joke.
Well, I think that's
how big they are.
Yeah,
the players are so big.
What's gonna happen? It's gonna flatten the whole thing. Like
FBS SCS is what our mutual friend who coaches at a mid-major has always said it's going to be. There's going to be the football. There's going to be the 1A and D1 and 1AA.
Sure.
Whatever you want to call those things, like that's what it's going to be.
Sure.
He's like, because it's just not tenable for mid-majors who just don't have the kind of funding and never will. And it's not responsible to ask them to do that, to compete at that level.
I mean, now with the portal too, it's just you get your face ripped off. It's like you can't even develop a kid. Like, because he's just gone.
It's just got to be like junior college, You got to be okay. You got to That's what you are these days. You're going to sell.
No doubt, but no one's forcing the JCs to go like.
Oh, I totally agree. But but that's why it's like there's going to be another class. That's why that FCS, that's going to be a thing. It has to be.
Yeah.
Whatever they end up calling it or whatever it ends up being. We don't ask, the best 1AA schools. We don't ask like 1AA schools to truly compete with the Power 5 in football. Like sure the App States and those things happen, but come on, it's like ridiculous. We don't expect that, and that's where baseball is going to go. So for everyone who's mad about it in baseball, I don't like it personally, but that's also because I grew up with a different product. But I mean, this is not a new thing. Like football has just been this way for a long time, and basketball is this way too, with the NIT and the NCAA championships, right? And those are separated by tournaments, but like football is definitely separated by divisions.
Oh yeah,
that's where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Well, one of the two may happen. I don't know. Maybe baseball will be separated by tournaments, which I can see the allure of. Maybe the NIT comes to baseball instead, but I can also see it's split by divisions. But make no mistake, it's going to happen.
That'd be kind of.
I don't know what the best approach is, but it's going to be split.
Yeah, that'd be actually kind of interesting. Also, the NIT thing would be good too because you can have the like, like Campbell made a pretty good run. There's like you get these mid majors that have
20 guys in the portal now.
I know, but like
9.
You get these guys where like.
Great friend of
you have Zach Neto or whatever, and all of a sudden, but like you get to this place where like you have a team that pops off for a year, or like they just come together, or whatever for whatever reason they're just a great team. They could potentially make a run, and then the big conference teams that can't hack it or whatever. There's a tournament for that, and
that is the argument, right? The George Mason of basketball, like,
for sure.
The Campbell, like that is the argument for keeping it one division, 2 tournaments, which I would love to see, but it might get to a point where like the Campbells, they just never will compete at the, maybe they never will compete.
It's hard right now. I mean, I think with MLB contracting the minor league slots again, and with NIL money, so that it makes sense to like. Yeah. If you're not fully baked coming out of, you don't feel the need to go to the draft, which you might have felt previously. So yeah, I mean, I think it really does, change the dynamics, but it also then just makes it so that like, I think it's going to be more the norm that you see somebody like Wyatt Langford be up in a year.
Yeah.
Cause it's just like, oh yeah, like you're already fully cooked, like in the same way that an NFL team's first round draft pick is on the roster and taking meaningful snaps.
Yeah,
ideally,
right. I mean, the draft is going to go more and more college.
The draft will go more college. Yeah, I think it'll be harder and harder to be a high school.
Yeah,
high school kid.
Top X picks will be college. This year will be, I don't know, between 5 and 7, 5 and 10, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, there's a couple of kids that are really separating themselves for high school,
but
that are high school kids. But
it's get past pick 20, NIL money's pretty dang good.
I know. There was one year where the Diamondbacks selected like a high school first baseman, and then you look back at that and you're just like, this is when I was like big Diamondbacks fan or whatever. It's just like, oh my god, it's just like that's probably. Over time, as these opinions sort of as like the player modeling converges, and then you have fewer slots in the draft, and there's NIL money, and the roster slots at the MLB level just continue to get compressed. It just leads itself to this set of
the fusion of Japanese players makes it harder to be in the big league.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, increasing globalization of the sport. It's just like
all good things for the sport. But
great things for the sport.
Great things for the fans, the players.
Not good things for high school first basemen. Great things for good things for generational up the middle talent. Like, okay, great.
Yeah, and the big leaguers who are having kids and they all know. They're all telling their kids to go to school unless they're drafted like top 5.
Yeah,
They're not.
Yeah.
Like Matt Holliday is just like, hey, beyond this, we ain't doing it.
Yeah, sure.
First overall, right? That
right.
Okay, fine.
Twist my arm.
Yeah, but even he, even if it's offered like X million and his kids like, I'm going to go to college, you think Matt Holliday would be like, oh, you can't turn that $9 million. Matt Holliday would be like, all right,
sure.
I get it. It's like, I get it. NIL money had nothing to do in that case, but it's just like, I mean, we know. I mean, we know how later. We know, and we know it's like, I don't care where you go. Jack, you're going to school.
Yeah.
That's just how it is, And they almost universally, like every time I talk to big leaguers, they have pretty good kids, first round, second round, whatever. That it's just almost always consistently like, no, I like in an ideal world, if it's like second round, he's like, I hope my kid goes to junior college. He's like, it isn't going to happen. I would love it for him.
Yeah.
Just we don't live in an age where that maybe makes sense anymore. He's like, but I would like that, but I want him to go to school. Like that's just how it is. And if some team reaches and it makes sense, okay. But, I really want him to go to school. It's his decision, but man, I want him to go to school. Almost always you hear it.
Yeah.
I respect the kid's wishes and they're going to let him do it because he's 18, but just a lot of them, it's like,
Yeah.
because a lot of them either play or they currently work in a front office and they're like, well, I see our minor leagues and,
That's right.
like a lot of them stay connected to
That's
the team,
right.
and
Yeah.
like, man, coming up, it wasn't this hard, because they think about it, they reflect on their career.
It's tough. It is a meat grinder.